Back during my first year of making Anime Abandoned in 2011, I made a short review of one of my favorite anime films of all time, Ghost in the Shell. Rivaled only by Akira in terms of impact on the American anime market, Ghost in the Shell is an out-and-out masterpiece of animation, as troubled and flawed as it was. While the story walked a thin tightrope between contemplative and navel-gazing, what can never be taken away was its visuals and its near-perfect sense of atmosphere. I dare say that no other anime film was able to merge the visual and sound in such a meaningful and effective way. Well, maybe Jinro, but only by the slimmest of margins. To say that Ghost in the Shell is an important piece of filmmaking is doing a disservice to the film. From its landmark technical achievements to its influences that can still be felt today, Ghost in the Shell has a rightful place in film history. It matters. Its sequel? If you know the story of Ghost in the Shell, then the mere notion of a sequel seems almost laughable, especially when you consider the ending. Not to compare apples to oranges or anything, but this would be like making a sequel to Blade Runner. Alright. Jokes aside, the fact remains that making a sequel to Ghost in the Shell would invariably mean climbing a very steep hill. Where can you go from an ending like Ghost in the Shell's? I suppose it's not impossible, and it's not like the world that the story is set in is bereft of ground to cover or explore, but it'll certainly take a deft hand for this sequel to not retroactively ruin the first. Luckily, Mamoru Oshii returned as director, who at that point pretty much wrestled creative control of Ghost in the Shell away from the original creator Shiro Masamune, who was probably too busy drawing women who looked like they just came back from an oil wrestling match. Say what you will about Mamoru Oshii taking Ghost in the Shell in a different direction than its source material, but you can't argue that it wasn't for the better. Look, I'm not gonna pretend that seeing Motoko have hardcore lesbian sex with two other women is like watching a snuff film, but it does kind of detract away from the thematic weight of the story. Just a bit. Especially when you consider that the only reason why Mamoru Oshii had Motoko have a lesbian three-way was because he didn't want to draw a dude's butt. His words, not mine. So, if Mamoru Oshii had to take out the extraneous lesbian porn and the off-putting slapstick and facial expressions, and this all leads to how the film turned out, God bless him, he's earned my trust. And the fact that Kenji Kawai is also returning as composer further solidifies the situation. So the sequel is in good hands. Unfortunately, the US localization wasn't. See, while most anime released these days are through established licensing companies like Funimation or Viz, Ghost in the Shell 2 was, and still is, more complicated. See, Manga Entertainment ponied up some cash to help produce the original Ghost in the Shell, therefore they hold some of the rights of that film, as well as the television series with Bandai Entertainment. However, this did not extend to other properties of the brand, including its very own sequel. Who owns the rights to Ghost in the Shell 2 then? Well, DreamWorks does. Sort of. See, they bought the rights to the film and released it themselves. They also bought the rights to make their own live-action Can of Worms. Film. But DreamWorks released an inferior DVD that didn't even have proper subtitles on them, just closed captioning, and no dub. It would take nearly 4 years for us to get an official dub here in the States, thanks to Bandai sublicensing the film from Paramount? Yeah, during the interim, Go Fish Pictures, which was DreamWorks' auteur subsidiary, tanked and tanked hard, releasing only 4 films during its existence, including Ghost in the Shell 2. The rights to it, as well as the rest of the back catalog, had been sold to Paramount. So, no big whoop, right? All that changes is the name on the check. Well, in a perfect world, that's where the story ends. But this isn't a perfect world, is it? Bandai only held the sublicense for about a year until they began downsizing in 2009, halting the production of the DVD. Today, the rights are being held in some dusty folder in Paramount's vault, and the most widely available copy of Ghost in the Shell 2 is not the superior Bandai version, you know, the one that has the dub, but the shitty DreamWorks version. This is the sequel to Ghost in the Shell, not some shitty 80s OVA that Central Park Media were goaded into licensing back in the day. Why is this so goddamned hard to see? I've never seen an anime film so crippled by its own release, especially in the DVD age. And the true tragedy of it all is that it's a good movie. Not as great or groundbreaking as the first one, certainly, but it's thoughtful and well animated and certainly well acted. It's a worthy film to add to your collection. Too bad you can't, not without paying some ridiculously gouged prices. Consider this review an apology of sorts. Ghost in the Shell 2? You deserved way better than what you got, and I hope this mea culpa makes up for over a decade of wrongdoing. This is Ghost in the Shell 2, Innocence. The film opens very similarly to the original. In fact, you might say it's basically the same, except for the intrusive and not at all seamless CG. This is a minor nitpick, and I fully admit that this is mostly me talking here, but I hate the direction that Ghost in the Shell 2 went after the first film, in terms of its animation. I know that CG can be used to accentuate and help animate certain scenes, but here it just feels lacking in that cold, gritty atmosphere that enraptured me as a young 12-year-old. Also, this is the reason why I hate Ghost in the Shell 2.0. I can't imagine a worse thing to do to a film that is predicated upon its atmosphere and visuals than changing the color palette and using more attention-calling CG. Ugh. Alright, look, all I'm trying to say is that, you know all those fanboys and girls that bitch and moan about the special edition of Star Wars? I know where they're coming from. Bato arrives on the scene of a double homicide perpetrated by a rogue gynoid. The scene itself is a slow, simmering build-up to the reveal of the murderous bot, changing the mood established in the original film from a cyberpunk thriller to almost a horror movie.
Please help us.
Of course, no Ghost in the Shell film is complete without an opening credit sequence built around seeing a birth of a cyborg, or gynoid in this case. And to be frank, yeah, this does feel like we're just simply retreading the same ground of the original. But on the flip side, I feel that the opening scene does a better job at not only introducing the main character of the film, but also the plot. In the original scene, iconic as it is, there's very little information imparted on the viewer regarding who Motoko Kusanagi is, or why she's assassinating this target. Here, not only does it introduce Bato as a member of Section 9, as well as infer what Section 9 is, but it also sets up the mystery of what's to come with the creepy as all hell gynoid. You got my attention, Innocence. What are you going to do with it? Seems that this incident is not isolated, with a couple of government personnel having met their end at the hands of these manufactured bots, created by a company called Locus Solus. Sensing that these might be terrorist-related, Chief Aramaki sends Tokusen Bato to investigate the remains of the gynoid from earlier.
Forensics is up on the 19th floor, down the hall on the right. Do I have to show you the way?
No thanks. We didn't come all the way here for a tour.
You know, there's an old saying that goes, not even crows will peck at a persimmon that's still green. But you can always count on the bastards to start circling overhead when it's right.
That's an oddly specific saying. I guess it must have sounded cooler in the original Japanese. Part of the problem of Mamoru Oshii films is that they often feature obtuse dialogue, and here it reaches an apex of pretentious silliness. But this is where the dub salvages the script, as every actor gives it their all to try and emote from such stiff and unnatural conversation. And you know what? At the end of the day, I would rather hear well-acted but weirdly written dialogue than simply read weirdly written dialogue. Luckily in this instance, we're given a choice between the two, when most of the time we're just left hearing horribly acted, weirdly written dialogue.
Sometimes it's an obsession, like to live in planet Silicone.
The coroner states that the gynoid's murderous tendencies could stem from a number of mechanical or software flaws, but clues in the two that they are used as sex dolls, hence the discretion around the case. Of course, this information is imparted between solid walls of philosophizing about the nature of man and machine.
The dolls that little girls play with when they pretend to be mommy aren't merely surrogate babies or toys on which to practice mothering skills. Maybe these girls aren't just rehearsing for motherhood. Perhaps playing with dolls is very nearly the same thing as actually raising children.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Hey, if your job meant being surrounded by broken simulations of the human form, you'd wax poetic about the fragile nature of human identity too. Though I'm not a fan of the navel-gazing, I do appreciate that the film takes a decidedly more intense interest in the horror of that what looks human but isn't. Long, hanging shots of broken robots, paired with an off-kilter and ethereal soundtrack, create an atmosphere of anxiousness and unrest. But then, it gets kind of silly.
Thank you for your time, Ms.
Just Haraway. No Ms., Mrs., or Miss.
What is is that supposed to be for? 8K resolution? God, the lengths that some people will go to for HD. Anyway, as I was saying, that one's on you!
Victim is a shipping inspector at Locus Solus. Area secured. Police on scene.
907, roger. Whoa, what a coincidence.
I, like God, do not play with dice and do not believe in coincidence.
See? I can machine gun pretentious bullshit too. The crime scene in question reveals little, save for a picture of a girl and possible ties to the Yakuza, a lead that we'll have to wait for tomorrow to be followed up on. In the meantime, Bato returns to his solitary life, caring for his high-maintenance dog and, well, not much else. In a strange way, this quiet, carefully animated montage is similar to the scene in the original film of Motoko floating alone in the sea, both impart a lonely, distant feeling, but while Motoko seemingly yearns to escape the solid and enter the ethereal, Bato seems complacent in his solid-state life. I've always loved visual storytelling like this, where mood and atmosphere are imparted upon the viewer not through dialogue, but through movement and expression. It's a shame that this happens so rarely in anime. The next day, Section 9 reviews their collected evidence, including the bits of Yakuza involvement. Bato and Togasa are tasked with investigating this lead. Investigate means firing countless rounds of hot lead into nameless goons, right?
You said you would avoid shooting.
I did avoid shooting, as much as possible.
So, after Bato performs detective work by way of Red Brown, they find absolutely nothing. So, what was the point of this?
If something fishy's going on between Locus Solus and them, then they're definitely going to bite at the bait.
That's why you did something so over the top?
If the old man was really bent about what we did, then we'd be at Section 9 pulling desk duty right now.
You took out an entire building full of Yakuza with a goddamn MG. What are you gonna do to get shit canned around here? Firebomb the city block? Seems as though that someone took the bait, but not in the way Bato expected, as someone has remotely hacked his brain, causing him to imagine that he's being shot at when in reality, he's just shooting himself. Arakawa manages to save Bato from turning the gun on someone else, later revealing that he had been tailing him under direction from Aramaki, and that should they continue their investigation, it will be without direct and public help from Section 9. Without any options left, Togasa and Bato head to the Northern Territory to speak with Locus Solus.
How precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand.
That's Psalm 139 from the Book of David, the Old Testament, right? The way it calls up quotes at the drop of a hat, maybe the phenotype of your external memory device has some of your philosophical leanings.
Yeah, like you're one to talk, Plato.
Ugh. God bless Crispin Freeman and Richard Epcar. They are trying their best with this goddamn script. It's not just that the characters pull these philosophical treatises at the drop of a hat, but the back and forth between the characters are often played lightning quick, like a 1940s film noir story. There's just no breathing room for anyone, no space for an actor to really emote.
Yeah, you don't have to be a Yakuza, but you also said that you needed weapons. I have a family to think of.
I'll go by myself if you want.
No, I'm going. That's what partners do. I want you to give me your word, though.
We're just gonna talk. I'll avoid shooting as much as possible. You happy now?
Yes, I am.
Then let's go do this, partner.
For fuck's sake, Aaron Sorkin would tell these guys to hit the brakes. Halfway through the film. Wasn't it about here in the original movie we had a musical montage of a Hong Kong-inspired city? Well, deja fucking vu, as we again have a musical montage of a Hong Kong-inspired city. Not only that, but here it means way, way less than it did in the original. Motoko's struggle, more than the existence of the Puppet Master or Section 6, was a crisis of the self. In a world where your body could be bought and used by another person, or be used simply as a mannequin in a department store front, how do you separate yourself from them? There's a reason why this scene followed Motoko's speech about what makes her Motoko Kusanagi and not someone else. Here, this scene holds completely separate to Bato's character arc, which I remind you is supposed to be similar to Motoko's.
When I look at Bato lately, I'm reminded of the Major and the way she was just before she vanished. Let a man walk alone. Let him commit no sin. Let him have few wishes. Like an elephant in the forest.
There's one shot towards the end where puppets are burned, presumably as a ceremony for this festival, and you could construe this as mirroring what the coroner said about disposable androids, but the resonance is fairly weak. In the end, this scene just reveals itself to be yet another production IG tech demo, like we didn't have enough of them already. Still, pretty though, and the beauty continues as Bato and Togusa happen upon a remote mansion where a hacker is believed to reside, presumably one of the only hackers capable of playing mind games with Bato. Now, if you're the kind of person who is annoyed by obvious use of symbolism and imagery, you're probably gonna hate this next part. Thematically, shots of Bato being led around the mansion by shadows of people guiding him, and images of affluent people blissfully unaware that the table in which they dine on their sumptuous and luxurious meals is on fire, seems a tad much. Though I find myself forgiving all of this because the hacker in question strikes me as the kind of eccentric loner that would fill their home with "ask me what it means" conversation pieces. Think Sander Cohen if he were a hacker by way of Sloth from Seven. And speaking of Bioshock, the story takes a turn for the Ouroboros. The hacker, unknowing to both Bato and Togusa, takes control of their minds and sets them in an unending waking nightmare. Kind of like Endless 8, except the joke is being played on the characters and not on us. About time this film got back to being a horror movie.
This is seriously disturbing, isn't it?
Unsettling, maybe, but disturbing? Nah. Closer, but no cigar. Sorry, but in my book, nothing Ghost in the Shell related is as disturbing as the leaked test photos of Boma.
When I kill your brother, I talk! Yes!
Good luck sleeping tonight. Luckily, Bato didn't fall for the virtual maze and manages to pull Togusa from teetering over the edge of infinite madness. How was he able to keep his head?
According to Jacob Grimm, an artificial human called a golem was brought to life by inscribing the word Emet, meaning truth, on its forehead. But if you erase the first two letters, AE, it becomes Met, meaning death, and the creature turns back to lifeless clay. This was an omen warning me that there was no truth to be found here in the mansion.
Because Motoko managed to break through the hacker's digital barrier and gives Bato a cryptic clue that could have been easily construed for anything else. Alright, look, if you need to warn someone that they're about to walk into a trap, warn them that they're about to walk into a trap. Don't bank on them being familiar with 16th century Polish folklore. Still, with the hacker incapacitated, Bato and Togusa now not only have the location of a remote Locus Solus offshore plant, but also a means to backdoor into the facility. Since Bato's Black Ops work didn't entail stealth missions, he figures that the best way to infiltrate said facility is with guns blazing. And with the hacker slave to open any and all partitions of the facility's security, he does just that. It's an all-out assault, as the breach not only signals the human guards to their posts, but the gynoids are released and go haywire, slaughtering friend and foe alike. It looks grim for Bato, as he's vastly outnumbered, but a gynoid begins helping him.
The Holy Spirit descended upon him. Been a long time, Major.
You haven't changed one bit.
Get moving, Point Man. I got your back.
It's moments like that make me want to fight against the feelings of being jaded and cynical. Sure, it's only a moment, but I'm not going to let it go unappreciated. Although, the moment is slightly ruined when they felt the need to do a callback to the most effective and brutal scene in the first film, but again, not going to let it go unappreciated. The Major manages to shut the entire facility down, sending it back to restricted waters. So, why all the secrecy if they're just making sex bots? Well, those gynoids? Yeah, they're actually shells holding copies of the individual consciousnesses of kidnapped girls that were sold to them by the Yakuza. they copied the girls' minds, thereby destroying their brains in the process, so that the dolls could appear to be more real, a process which is called ghost dubbing, with only one survivor.
That inspector who was murdered tried to help these children by tweaking the gynoid's ethics code. When he was found out, he was served up to the Yakuza as their boss's killer. That's the long and short of it.
It's a bittersweet end for everyone, as though the crimes Locus Solus committed have been brought to light, it came at the cost of innocent lives, the people that the gynoids had killed, and the dolls that were given life just to be snuffed out. The Major says her goodbyes to Bato, assuring him that whenever he accesses the net, she'll be there with him. And we end on Togusa reuniting with his family. Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence is complicated, to put it lightly. I keep coming back to the fact that it pales in comparison to the original film, which is unavoidable like any other sequel. But then again, that might be the point. When you consider that the story is about the nature of original versus simulation of original, it makes sense that the sequel keeps making allusions and references to the original, from set-piece scenes down to the very structure of it. Hell, you might even make a case that the CG further strengthens the meta-narrative, digitally making a world that was once purely analog. That we see the sequel as the lesser of the two can only logically lead to the assumption that the original is superior to the simulation. But that shouldn't mean we completely discount it. Like the coroner, who simply wishes that the dolls weren't thrown away, or Bato expressing remorse and anger that dolls had to be killed, a simulation still matters. Ghost in the Shell 2 matters. Even if you don't want to look at the film in such a light, Ghost in the Shell 2 still has enough merit to warrant your time and energy. Certainly more than the treatment it's been getting over the last 10 years. Can it be up its own ass? Of course, but so could the first film, and while it's not as visually arresting as the first, that's mostly just me talking. I can still call it a beautifully made movie with earnest, if strained performances and a lasting impact. If you can snag yourself a copy of the Bondi release for a reasonable amount, I suggest you do it. The wrong-titled DreamWorks version? I suppose, if you have to. Well, September's almost here, and that means I'm on another month-long vacation. But I'll be back in October with a month-long look at our favorite director man-child, Masami Obari. Want to play us out, Blindbeard the Pirate?
Who said that? Where are you? Where are you? Show yourself! Oh!
This is gonna be a long month. Long live your Lord High Regent Sage! Long live Benetopia!